Hello, it's Miss Battleaxe here, showing you how to write a sentence, how to improve your punctuation, and just think a bit more about it. I'm not going to show you everything about punctuation, but I'm just going to show you a few shortcuts. Your number one spag skill is the ability to write a sentence, and that really involves remembering to use full stops, commas, and question marks. They don't cost anything, they're not going, it's not going to break the bank. I think a lot of you don't think about your punctuation enough. So in this video, let's have a look. So the best way to think about punctuation is to do one simple thing, and that's to read it out loud, sometimes known as proofreading. Say proofreading, you're looking for your errors. If you read it out loud, you think, oh, hang on a minute, I've paused there. What do I need? Oh, I need a full stop. So here's a typical example of the kind of rubbish that we English teachers and examiners have to read. As I waited in the players' dressing room, I felt increasingly nervous. What if we lost the game? What if I made a mistake? My teammates were feeling the same way. We had been looking forward to this match for so long. We had been training every night. Now it was torture. Isn't that rubbish? And I've run out of breath, and I actually had to take breaths in all the wrong places, so it didn't make sense. It's like the rhythm. You listen to a piece of music, you hear the beat, don't you? That's what makes music interesting. It's the beat, it's the rhythm. So a piece of writing without punctuation is like a piece of music without any rhythm or any beat at all. So here's the same sentence, and I put yellow marks where you need to put some punctuation. I don't want you to worry too much about the first one. That one's an apostrophe. But the others, I do want you to have a go at correcting those. I'm suggest that you pause the video, and I'll see you in a few minutes when you've corrected it. Pause the video now. A few minutes later. Now then, are you ready? Shall we have a look at the corrected version, see if it's the same as yours? There you go. And now, if I read that out, it's much better. As I waited in the players' dressing room, I felt increasingly nervous. What if we lost the game? What if I made a mistake? My teammates were feeling the same way. We had been looking forward to this match for so long. We had been training every night. Now it was torture. Isn't that better? Just with a few little marks, it makes it much easier to read. You put that punctuation in, and that has gone from a band 1 piece of writing to a band 3 piece of writing. In other words, it's gone from a grade 1 to a grade 4. So top tip number 1 is read it out loud. And don't save it all to the end. Make it easier for yourself. If you leave all your dirty dishes for 2 weeks, all them bran flakes are going to be rock hard, aren't they? And you're not going to be able to get them off. However, if you do your washing up after every meal, it's a lot easier. And it's the same with proofreading, with reading it out loud. You're not going to do it right at the end. I've seen people writing exams and they're writing, and right at the end, they stop and start reading it. Well, it's like 2.5 pages of drivel and gobbledygook, and you're trying to make sense of it. No, write one sentence, check it, and when you're sure it's right, move on. So let's have a look now at top tip number 2, because if you chuck in a load of commas because you think they look good, you're getting it wrong. If you're in doubt, just use more full stops, because if you don't understand how to use commas and you're just chucking them in all over the place, it's going to be a right mess. So let's think about how to use commas. We're going to learn how to write a complex sentence. So the first thing we need to do is understand a bit of grammar, and that will teach us how to understand when to use that little mark there on the screen, that comma. A complex sentence has a main clause and a subordinate clause. You may have heard these expressions at school. You might have heard them called something different. After the lockdown ended, doesn't make sense on its own. It needs something adding to it. I saw my friends. So after the lockdown ended, we'll talk about that in a minute. After the lockdown ended is a subordinate clause. It does not make sense on its own. I saw my friends does make sense on its own. It could be a little sentence on its own. And that is a main clause. Now, if you have a subordinate clause next to a main clause like that, and the subordinate clause comes first, shove a comma in the middle to separate main clause and subordinate clauses. You can swap the clauses around, and you don't usually need a comma if the main clause comes first. So if we swap those around, I saw my friend after the lockdown ended. That's our subordinate clause after the lockdown ended. That's our main clause. And you don't usually need a comma, not always. Whatever looks best, really. So here we go. Main clause or subordinate clause. Boris caught the virus, didn't he just? Even though he washed his hands. That's what he said. After watching TV, we ate a lovely pie. Oh, I could just eat a bit of pie right now. Boris caught the virus even though he washed their hands. Right. Boris caught the virus is a main clause. It makes sense on its own. Even though he washed his hands, you couldn't say that on its own. That's a subordinate. After watching TV is a subordinate clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. It needs something to sort it out at the end. What happened after watching TV? We ate a lovely pie. So that's our subordinate clause. And because that's coming first, we bung our comma in there. There you go, pussycats. That's not too bad, is it? You can also split up clauses. Like here. Now, if you look at the yellow one, Thomas was really funny today. Thomas was really funny today. That's like a main clause, but I've split it up and put something in the middle of it. And because I've split it up and put something in the middle of it, that thing that's in the middle needs to be protected by those commas. Thomas was really funny today is a main clause. So you know now that who can sometimes be quite annoying is a subordinate clause. In other words, it doesn't make sense on its own. It needs something to make it make sense. So 2 commas in a sentence, there you go. Why does it matter? Well, it does matter, pussycats, because if you want to get your writing into band 3, that's grade 4 and above, you need to be able to write a complex sentence. Don't comma splice. That's when you use a comma to separate 2 main clauses. And it's the most common mistake that people make. Well, one of the many common mistakes people make. So here we've got 2 main clauses. I am hungry. Makes sense on its own. I am actually. I need pizza. Now I've seen that written down. I really fancy a pizza. But it's Tuesday and we don't usually have pizza on a Tuesday. It's more of a Friday thing, don't you find? I am hungry. Makes sense on its own. It's a main clause. I need pizza is a main clause. There we go. And that in the middle is called a comma splice. And it's when you use a comma to separate 2 main clauses, and it's wrong. It should be a semicolon. So you use a semicolon to separate 2 main clauses that are related to each other. If I'd said, I am hungry, and then my next bit was, my parents live in New York, they wouldn't be related to each other. So you wouldn't use a semicolon there. You'd use a full stop because they're 2 different things. They've got to be related to each other if you want to use a semicolon. However, you can pass your GCSE and get a grade 4 and above without knowing how to use semicolons. But the main thing to do is don't comma splice. Don't comma splice, use a semicolon if you can. And if you look at that sentence, don't comma splice is a main clause, use a semicolon is a main clause, and whoopee, I've separated them with a semicolon. And if you can't be bothered to use semicolons, if you can't be bothered to learn about them, just use more full stops. But don't keep bunging loads of commas in, because that's what's going to mess up your writing. So let's recap, pussycats. 3 tips for better writing. 1, read it out loud as you write it, not at the end. 2, use more full stops. For goodness sake, they're free. You don't have to pay for them. And thirdly, learn how to write a complex sentence. Okay, this video is just kind of 10 minutes long. I hope that is enough to clarify a few things in your mind, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.